bring down a strong foe or protect someone from danger. I feel a sense of accomplishment. So while I wouldn't say I enjoy it, I suppose it does brighten my day a bit. And yet, the moment that happens, I feel so guilty. After what I've done, I don't have the right to be happy.
Hey, what's up, comrades? On to the next game. So, I had mentioned this Redemption Reapers game before. It's made by the same guys who make Ender Magnolia and Ender Lily, or at least it's like a not developed. What's the other term for it? Produced or it's presented by the same company, the Binary Haze. It's completely different. It's a tactical. It's like a tactics game, like a turn-based strategy role-playing game, if you will. As you just identify those as like tactics games, like Tactics Ogre and Tactics, and Final Fantasy Tactics, right? Where you have like certain units and they can level up and do things. These guys don't evolve in this game, but they get new abilities and you can like invest in their abilities and items and stuff. And I'm going to be straight honest truth with you guys. This game is hard as shit. So I implemented my best friend when it comes to getting through these games so I can do these like story reviews. That is Cheat Engine. So, yep, I'm a dirty casual, whatever. The game is super fun, I gotta say, with Cheat Engine. Because there was a couple times. What drove it home is I think I was like playing through the game and I just don't have a lot of time for this stuff. And so if I'm just like playing it normal, like I sit there and I'm like, okay, cool, I get it. This is a slow grind. Like when you're playing this, I'm not gonna say it's like a Dark Souls, but you definitely have to like utilize friends helping. So the way the game functions is that every time you attack, the enemy counterattacks. All right, and then some of your characters can get a bonus attack on top of that, where that is not counterattackable. And then you have different skills you can use. Some that like move guys to different squares, or some that avoid like a counterattack. And you got to implement these things. And then you have friend attacks. So after you make an attack, if you have like friends nearby, like if their melee characters are standing like in the square next to the boss or the bad guy, or there's like there's 5 characters. So then or the spear guy, Lu or Lug or however they pronounce it. I heard it sounded completely different in the Japanese and the English dubs. And then or Karen who's an archer, they can stand like a diagonal or like a square away and they can get like an extra attack. And Karen, you have to unlock this ability with like a certain skill. But you get weapons, and the weapons all have durability, and so you have to repair them after battles. But you get weapons pretty regularly, so you don't always have to like repair because you can just like move on up. You can upgrade weapons. But, the whole thing is like very like, it's almost like a survival horror game, like Resident Evil, where it's like your resources are very limited, and so you could very easily fuck yourself over in this game. I cheated in several maneuvers, so I didn't do like a god code or anything because I still want to like play these. I still get enjoyment. I like being overpowered in games, but I don't necessarily want to be like invincible per se. I just like having like access to all my stuff so that I can like utilize everything and just be like overpowered. Okay, so what I did is I gave all my characters like unlimited skill points essentially, so all their skills are like maxed out, which is incredibly helpful. And then I gave myself essentially unlimited money. Normally you don't get money. You don't get money from killing guys, which is a neat thing that this game does. You have to like find shit like bronze, silver, just kind of like crap like that, and then you sell that to the merchant in between missions, and then you can use that to repair, buy new stuff. There's like stat boosting items. They cost a lot. I don't understand how you could possibly get them unless you just grind out skirmishes. So between levels, you can go back and play previous levels, but with like a new mission set, essentially, and it doesn't progress the story. And originally, I was like, you have to do this to like get to a level, to build up skill points and all this stuff. Oh yeah, and when you attack, so let's say, so Sarah's like kind of the main character, and then Glenn's like the other character you start with in the game. So if Glenn's standing next to a Mort, Morts are the bad guys. If he's standing next to a Mort and Sarah runs up and does her dagger attack on that Mort, then Glenn gets an attack. And if that kills it, then Sarah gets like the majority of the experience points. She gets like, let's say 30, and then Glenn will get like 8, for example. So it's a Shining Force thing where you want to be the one who does the final blow. Essentially, it's not as like punishing as Shining Force, because like Shining Force, sometimes you like hit a guy, if the character didn't kill him, they'd get like no experience points. But it's similar to that. It just tends to be a little bit higher, and then like the level differential, or like the difficulty of like the mort. Like at some point I was hitting guys and not killing them and still getting like 20-30 experience, but this is like a boss or like a much more powerful enemy. Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything else mechanically before we get into the story. So yeah, the game, it's pretty straightforward. You have a mission, or sometimes you have a cutscene. We'll usually have a cutscene before like an arc, right? Like when we're talking about arcs, I'm talking about like comic book arc, or like a manga arc, or an anime arc, where it's like, oh hey, we're taking like the mines, and the mine is like 3 levels, and so before you go into the mine, there'll be like a little cutscene of like you guys back at the nest. The nest is like the hometown. It's like the base of operations, and you'll be interacting. The characters will like have a little scene interacting with each other, talking about this mysterious event that happened like 2 years ago that gets revealed later on, or you kind of get like spoon-fed stuff, or like, you know, characters just having relations with each other, not like sexual, but like you can just see them interacting and whatnot. And then for the rest of the arc, you don't really get cutscenes. You go from battle to prep phase, then battle phase, and prep phase, and battle phase, and prep phase. And when you get done with that like arc, then usually you'll get like a cutscene, and you'll get like a battle update. So it'll be like, you'll see like a map of the area, and it'll be like these forces moved here during this time, and like the plan was to like support them doing this. It's very like militaristic in that regard. And to be fair, your main crew of people, they're all mercenaries in the Ashen Hawk Brigade. Yeah. And they're kind of like centered in this part of the country or the world where these like morts just kind of like popped up recently, and they're just like going crazy and like destroying towns and everything. And like everyone in your team has like their own motivation for doing stuff. And in kind of like the old school / Dark Souls tradition, you find like stuff on the ground that gives you like a lot of information about the world building. So most of the world building is actually done through like items that you pick up. They call them relics. So I'm going to kind of review them as we go along as well, as part of like the story brief. And then also you get bios of characters, and sometimes the bios are updated so as we learn more about them. And the bios actually give you information that the cutscenes or the characters talking do not give you. So I'm also going to review those. Some of the artifacts that you get, like the artifacts, the accessories that you can get. So everyone can equip a weapon, and then they can equip 2 accessories. So the accessories all have little stories with them too, but a lot of them are just kind of like silly. A lot of the relics are silly too, so we're just going to briefly go over them. But just kind of like expand upon the world and that these people are living in. And it's all pretty dark, because a lot of times you'll be reading these like relics about like, oh, this joyous event, like we got married and stuff. And you're like standing around the ashes of this town that's been completely destroyed and everyone's been murdered. Or like this woman is like so happy to finally be pregnant after all these years, and you're like, there's her dead body. Right? Like, it's a pretty dark shit. It's definitely like, this is definitely like dark fantasy, and it's like cliches bit, but it's so fun. It's got like the story. I like all the characters; they're interesting. Luke is the hero of the day. He is so fucking cool. Not just because he wears a mask and like has a fucking like pilgrim hat and like uses a spear, which he does. He does so much goddamn damage. Like he one shots dudes, and then later on you get a skill where he does like first strike. So guys will run up to him. Like I'll literally just send him out all by himself, and he'll just get like 3 or 4 morts running up to him, and every time they attack, he gets first strike and kills them, and he's just like slaughtering dudes. Sarah's the next MVP, because when I tricked her out with all her skills, she is like virtually untouchable. Like her ability to dodge attacks is like maximized. Granted, if she gets hit, she's like dead immediately, but she'll dodge like almost everything, and then she always counterattacks. So it's not as like foolproof as Luke, but literally I can just send the 2 of them out there, and they will, unless I get like a bad roll, they will like slaughter everybody. Or it's something like you run into like a mage, because the enemy's got some mages, and they also got archers as well. Luke will dodge the archers and magic users like just as much as he dodges anything else, but which makes her better than the other tanks. The other tanks are Urz and Glenn, because they don't just shrug off. Like they take damage. So even if you use their defensive skills, magic does like a lot of fucking damage to them. And even and otherwise, they still like take a decent amount of damage, because you don't have that many hit points. Like these guys have like, I think I'm at level, when you're at level, like by the time you're level 20, you maybe have like 20-30 hit points. And so even if a guy's hitting you for like 2 points of damage, that's like 1/10 of your life, right? Like it's not nothing. So you only take so many blows like that, and you're fighting battles sometimes. There's like 30 of these fucking morts there, you know. And even if they're weak as shit, it's like they keep tic-tacking your like tanks, right? But if you're using Sarah, she just like dodges everything, so it's like meh. But like I said, when she does get hit, it's usually like a fatal blow. And then Karen's the archer. Her and Luke generally just kind of keep in the back, and they got a lot of distance they can move too. Now, the other thing that is interesting about this game is that your playthrough is not going to be the same as my playthrough. Not even if you cheat, right, or didn't cheat or whatever, because you get stats randomly. Like I literally saw this happen because I played a battle. Glenn gained a level. He got like 1 point bonus in all his stats, and then I like died, so I had to like restart the map. And so then I gained that level again, and I got like 1 point in like fucking dexterity or something. And I was like, oh, so. You can really get fucked over by like random chance in this game as well, which is another reason why I feel like no compulsion against like using Cheat Engine on this, so I can like get through this game at some point in the next like month, so I can move on to the next thing, so I can talk about the next thing. Yep. Okay. So I think that's just about everything. Yeah, your preparation period, you can like trade items out, you can repair stuff, upgrade stuff, sell stuff to the merchant, buy new stuff. You really can't buy that much stuff, to be completely honest. And then in the maps, you can find treasure. The treasure's usually like, there's usually at least one weapon upgrade. And when I say upgrade, I mean like the next, like it's like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. The characters all have like spear, axe, sword, daggers or short swords, and bow. So you just equip them with like the next level weapon, and it's not always stronger, but sometimes they give you stat bonuses or like more critical attack chance and stuff like that, so you kind of weigh that out, and then you can upgrade them using these stones you find. One of the guides I was reading before I decided to cheat was saying the most optimal thing to do is after you get your second level weapon to just use that the rest of the game, because it's going to be like more than enough as long as you're using like good strategy and you just continuously upgrade them. They're going to like match some of the more powerful weapons, and then at some point I guess you can use like legendary weapons or something that show up. Okay. Yeah, so there's relics and treasure. Okay, cool. So let's begin. So the game opens up with the cutscene at the very beginning of the game before you even start playing it. It's a snowy field, and we see a woman fighting these like monsters, right? These Mort. And then we're getting some like overdub, and she mentions feeling accomplished every time she kills one of these monsters, but she also feels guilty because she doesn't have the right to be happy. Dun dun dun. Right? It's dark shit. So we start the game. There's a village on fire, and we see like a woman running away, and then she gets killed. And there's all these monsters, and they're just killing all these people, and the whole village is getting destroyed. A bit later, a man and a woman come up to the village. It's the woman from the opening cutscene. We find out that her name is Sarah, and then this guy is Glenn, and they're members of the Ashen Hawk Brigade. And they talk about the Mort, right? And this is where we find out the name of these monsters, the Mort. And so then the game's like chapter 1, and then now it's time to fight. After the fight, we learn that the two soldiers are Sarah and Glenn. So at the beginning of the fight, we learn that they're Sarah and Glenn, and then we kill our way through the Morts. And then at the end of the battle, Sarah insists that we look for survivors. And Glenn's like, well, we're only going to find death here. And then he mentions we have to go help Lug. And then in that level, we found 2 relics. So the first relic is the village chief's diary. In the village chief's diary, he talks about a wedding that had preceded over and how the bride's family couldn't make it because like the carriages weren't running as much, and so that was concerning. But they still gave her everything they possibly could. And he recalls his own wedding and how he was super poor. And then we have another entry of his journal which mentions how he took all the children of the village to like a waterfall since it was really hot. And on the way back, they found some like dead deer, and that was really sketchy because it's like, this doesn't look like a hunter killed these things, right? So this is all like prepping. This is essentially like the people slowly, before they got destroyed in this literal village, we just saw them all got destroyed, that there was some hints that like something was amiss and something was going on. The other relic we find is an unsent letter, and it's from the married girl, the girl who got married by the elder in the previous relic, talking to her parents, wishing that there were carriages that could have brought them out, but that she's so happy and she wants to spend her life here, and she's so pleased with her husband, and she's excited to have a family and do all this stuff, and wah, she's dead now. So sad. We also check out the bio. So Sarah is identified as a quiet, shy woman due to her upbringing. She was raised in orphanages, and she was raised in an orphanage during a war. She was taught how to use daggers by Rowan, who is like the captain of the Ashen Hawk Brigade. And that she doesn't like violence, but life is what it is. And then it mentions that something several years ago, like a couple years ago, happened to make her question, like, even being alive, like something very seriously happened. And then Glenn's bio mentions that he's a rigid code of honor, that he's a swordman, and that he's a decisive and excellent leader. And that he never really speaks of his life before the brigade. So one of the things to note is that all this bio and everything, we're getting it all from like the perspective of Sarah. So Sarah's kind of like our character. It's like us, right? It's supposed to be like our perspective character. She has her own stuff and she talks and has her own opinions on things, but she tends to be a little less fleshed out, I would say, than the other characters, at least at the beginning of the game. And I think it's because she really is supposed to be like, we're supposed to be learning about this world and about the different characters from her, because at some point we learn more about Glenn, and like everyone else seems to like know the story except Sarah. He's like, Sarah, sorry, I never told you this before. And we're like, Nani deska? Anyway, so then when we head to the next battle, it's like, and this usually happens, so then you do your prep and maybe you get like a little battle report, and you'll hit like start the next battle, and it'll say like chapter next, so chapter 2. We get another cutscene. This one is of a man with a spear fighting Morts, and he's going to sweet his head. It's Luke. He looks around after everyone's dead, and then Glenn and Sarah run up, and they're like, all right, cool, glad you guys are here. Let's kill some more Mort. Hell yeah, let's do it. So we fight this, and this is one of those battles I really, the first battle is like super easy, you just kind of run through and kill, and this battle like really kind of like, okay, now I got to like strategize a little bit more. And this is before I even started cheating. I got through like the first 4 or 5 battles, I think, before I was like, all right, no, fuck this, I just got to get through this game. I can't be replaying these battles like 14 times until I figure out like the good strategy. Let's see. After the battle, Luke is like, hey, did you find anyone? And like, no, we failed. Dun, dun, dun. Again. Wah, wah, wah. And then Sarah's all sad-eponymous about it, but Luke is like, hey, Sarah, saving people from the Mort's not going to make up for what happened 2 years ago. And Sarah's about to argue with him about it, but Glenn's like, we don't have time for this. We got to return to the nest. And the nest is, this is where we find out the nest is like our home base. And in this level, we picked up 4 relics. We picked up the Village Chief's Diary 2 and 3. So in part 2, he speaks about dealing with merchants on a cloudy day, and the merchants were telling him that a nearby village got destroyed by monsters, and all these gory details, and he's like, oh, it made me sick. And I saw more animals in the woods, and the wind smells like blood, and I'm starting to get spooked. And then in Diary 3, he talks about he's finally seen one of these monsters, and he tells everyone to pack up and flee, and he like makes an apology to his dead wife because he should have made everyone leave sooner, and he should have realized what was going on, but now it's too late. And then as he's writing the journal, he talks about how he hears them coming, and he hears people fleeing and being killed, and he's like, please forgive me for being bad at my job and helping the people. We also find a child's journal, and this is another sad one. I mean, they're all kind of sad, but he talks about how this child kind of references back to like the Elder's journal. A lot of these stories we find kind of do that. They kind of like lead in. They're like different perspectives on the same concept. And the child's like talking about the chief was yelling about monsters, and his mom was like, oh, that's so sad. The chief's just sick. That's unfortunate. And then the kid is like, oh, I'm so excited for my new baby sister. My mommy's pregnant, and we're going to play, and it's going to be great. Wah, wah, wah. Because they're all dead. And the last one's called Last Words. And it's a cute little story about a king and a queen, and they were being overwhelmed by their enemies, and instead of like dying, they decided to use poisons to kill themselves so they could like die with dignity or something. And that, let's see. Oh, the person like writing this story down is like, I would have done the same. But I have no queen because I have a bad leg and I'm lonely, and I guess there's nothing to do. I hear people dying outside in the village, and I guess that's going to be my case too. But you know what? I had a good life, so farewell. Damn. Luke's bio is interesting. It talks about how he's a cynical realist. He's sharp-tongued, and he prefers to work alone. And a lot of his skills involve him not standing next to other people. And he loathes the Mort. He wants their death above anything else. And this brings him into conflict with Glenn and Sokius, who's like the second in command, the lieutenant of the Ashen Hawk Brigade. And then we get a cutscene where the crew's walking through the woods, and Morton is about to ambush them, but then an archer kills him, and they're calling him the lieutenant, and this is Sokius. He mentions that there's no word from the Dutchery yet, and that, you know, this whole area got like wiped out, so it's time to move on because people back in the nest need our help. Luke mentions a mountain, and that we will never give up. And then Luke taunts Sokius before we move on onto chapter 3. Sarah spent some time talking about how she's concerned about the Mort being so close to the nest. And then the lieutenant, Sokius, he mentions that the Mort are swarming and that it's only a matter of time and that we need to get help or we're going to be in a lot of trouble. But that's okay because the captain's got a plan. Luke knows if the captain has a plan, then hey, we're all good. For now, we just got to kill the Mort. So we got a choice. We can kill them all, or we can just sneak on through and get back to the nest. And we decide, as Sarah, that we want to kill all the Mort. And then Luke's like, I love it, Sarah. I knew we were the same minds. And then Sokius is like, no, we got to avoid fighting and just go. And literally, your decision has nothing. It's just like extra dialogue. It has nothing to do with anything. You're going to kill or the Mort, or you're going to get to like... It's one of those levels where if you like get to the certain spot, or if you kill like the leader, there's several levels like that. The level will just end, and so you don't have to like kill everybody. But if you want to kill everybody, to be completely honest, and get all the items in each level. And you can always go back and, I guess you can't always. I was reading in this other guide that like you can't always go back to the same level like this through a skirmish and like pick up items. So you should just worry about that. That's the most important thing, is making sure you pick up everything so you have all the necessary like goodies to continue on. So after we kill our way through this whole thing, we're traveling through the forest and we find a young boy, and there's so many dead people around him, but he's alive and he's like crying over his dad. And then Sarah approaches and speaks to him. The guy loses it a bit. We get a history lesson, how the Mort swarmed the land, how they destroyed the nation after nation, and how the Hawk Brigade, the Ashenhawk Brigade, was established specifically to find survivors and to help people battle back against the Mort. But this is the only person we've ever found, which is like not true, because we go to the nest and we see lots of other survivors, but whatever. And then back at the nest, we have Sokia speaking with the captain, who's Rowan. And he mentions that we found one survivor in this whole thing, and Rowan's like, well, I guess that's good enough. I'm glad we brought him. And then they talk about the Mort. There's no way to speak with the Mort. They like will not discuss with us. They will not parley. They will only battle. So we have to fight. We have to fight to stay alive. And then Rowan teases Sokius a little bit. And then he talks about how the negotiations are on their way, and that they must go smoothly, or that we're all going to be fucked. And that if they go smoothly, then the nest will be protected. They talk a little bit about what happened 2 years ago. They call it the Troden incident. And that incident is what turned the Ashenhawk Brigade from a band of outcasts into quote-unquote faithless reapers. But it's also like when they went astray, ... And then one of them's like, all right, anyway, we need to focus on the Mort and stop dwelling in the past. Later on, this is all cutscenes, Sarah approaches the boy, and she explains that this place is full of refugees, and that, you know, he can find a new life here and be taken care of. And then Glenn comes, and he's like, hey, we got to go. And she's like, okay. So then we go back to like the battle prep screen, and we take a look at our archive to find some more of these relics. So we get a child's drawing. It looks like a man is drawn by a 6-year-old, but that person's now dead. Sad times. We get some more bios. We find out that Rowan is a captain. He grew up in an orphanage, and then he got a job as soon as he was able to escape from the orphanage, but then his town was turned to ash, and that the only survivor by the Mort, and that the only survivor, or no, it wasn't by the Mort, it was just by like war. War turned his town to ash, and that he was able to escape, and that he was able to save a toddler named Sokius, or an infant. And then he became a mercenary to provide for both of them, and eventually started his own mercenary brigade, the Ashenhawk Brigade. Sokius's bio kind of double tails on this. It talks about him being cool-headed, shrewd, and that he was saved by Rowan at the orphanage. And then he thought for most of his life that Rowan was his dad, because it's like, he's a toddler, right? So he's like, I don't know, 3. And then Rowan at this point is at least 16 to 18. So, you know, he doesn't know. He's just like, that's the guy who takes care of me and makes sure I'm okay. So then because he respected his quote-unquote dad so much, he followed him to be a mercenary. And then we get the bio of the guy we saved. His name's Naki. He's the boy who survived. He used to enjoy nature, hanging out in the woods. He was an artist. His mother died in childbirth. But, you know, him and his dad, like, were tight, and then now his dad's dead, so sad eponymous. And then also he's an excellent cook. Okay, cool. So so Sokius comes to talk to everybody. It says he has word that the Morts have taken a mill, and that we need to make sure that it is safe to protect the nest. We then hear about Mount Lut, and that we need to also go there to fight the Mort, to drive them back to Mount Lut or something. Luke points out that this place is crawling with Mort, but that's okay. He loves killing him, so he's so happy. And then Sokius mentions that we have to do something. We have to like do something. We have to push back, make something happen. And then we get to the battle, and Sokius is like, let's take out the commander. And then Luke and Sarah, as me, I decide that I want to kill everybody. And so we do. We kill everybody. And then the boys all talk about how we successfully killed the Mort and sent them packing. And then Luke is like, I wish there was more people to kill. And at this point, I'm like, dude, fucking Luke is the best. Like, he just loves life. He's such like a crazy nihilist. And out of all the characters, he's just honestly the most fun. Like, he's just a badass. Let's see. All right. This guy. Yep. So back to the nest. Rowan lets us know that the Luton forces are finally on the move, that they're going to help us out. But that it's time that we put our big plan into motion to push the Morg back and finally defeat them. And then with the help of Luton, we'll finally have enough forces and enough capability to be able to push them back. Luke comments that, quote, impressed you managed to talk those peace-drunk milksops into marching to war. Oh, Luke is so good. Rowan mentions that it wasn't easy, but reminding them if our nation falls, they're next was the way to get them to do it. And then also he used some blackmail in the general. Based. So they sent it. So the Ludin Duchy sent an emissary, but that emissary for some reason was to Tolforia, which is like a nearby town, and it's definitely not. It's not like a straight shot to the nest from Ludin. And they're like, "How the fuck did he do that?" But we don't know. But it doesn't matter because we got to go rescue him either way. So otherwise, if we don't save him and he doesn't like make connection with us, there's no help coming. So then we're fucked. So Karen and Urs have already gone out to find the guy, and so Sarah, Lug, and Glenn are going to go out to support. So then we prep, we check out our relics. There's the soldier's notebook. It's a soldier who's embarrassed. He says the soldiers all turned and ran, and then he misses his gal Mary, and the war is hell. And then it clearly is that he's suffering some sort of PTSD, talking about his hands being stained with blood, and he's killed so many, and all that good stuff. Sad times. So then that leads us into chapter 5. We see a cutscene with the bald guy who with a sweet axe, and this archer lady who almost looks like an elf, killing. Yes, this is Karen and Urs. Karen is a babe, not as much as Sarah. But there's no sign of this emissary, so we all meet up, and it's like, oh, maybe we need to head to the North District. Oh, no, so they're like, oh, I don't see this emissary. We need to go meet up in the North District. And at that point, Sarah and crew show up. Luke taunts Urs and Karen, and it's like, oh, you left so many alive. What are you guys doing? And it's time to fight. And so this is like our crew for the rest of the game, right? Sometimes we get additions like Sokius or Rowan, or in this battle, we get the emissary will come as like an NPC. And the NPCs aren't so bad because they don't just like run off and die. They just kind of like hang tight next to like one of your characters. They just like choose a character and stick by them. So as long as that character's like with everybody else, which you should really be rolling as a pack for the most part in this game, then like you don't have to worry about them getting like massacred or anything. Let's see. So we fight our way through there. Oh no. So first of all, we fight, and then we talk again about going to the Northern District, and then we get a battle prep, and then we go to like part 2 of the Battle of Tolforia. So the relics we got here were Tolforia tourism bulletin, which is just propaganda about the town. We found an unaddressed letter. It's a married lady. It's to the married lady from like way back in the beginning, right? It's from her parents. They're talking about how they were begging for her and Marco, her husband, to come home because there's like all sorts of crazy, sketchy stuff going on, but they never made it. And that they want him to come back to Tolforia, which is a safe place, which is laughable because now they're all dead too, so everyone's dead, so it doesn't matter. And then we get one from like a crooked man notes, like it's like a crooked merchant's notes. And this guy's like he's like a real scam artist, and he loves talking about it and all his scams. And he's talking about rolling cabbages and grape juice to make them purple and more sweet, and then selling them for like 3 times as much. And then we get a wanted poster for Lug, and it's hard to read, but we can make out murderer, which does explain a lot. We also get Urs's biography. He's middle-aged, intelligent, cautious. He trusts Karen the most. And then in her biography, in Karen's, she also mentions that she trusts Urs the most, and that she's from a village in the deep woods. So she's pretty much like an elf. This takes us to chapter 6, where we get a cutscene of just a lot of wanton slaughter. Like the Mort are killing the shit out of a bunch of knights and stuff. And then we see the emissary. He's a swordsman. He's doing all right. He's surviving at least. So we roll in to save him. We kill Mort. After the battle, we speak with him. His name is Lorthos. Glenn asks why he came all the way up here instead of just coming straight to the nest like he should have. And the reason why is because he wanted to seek cooperation from the county of Tolforia, and that they were in discussions to ally with Ludin and with the Ashen Hawk Brigade before the Mort attacked. The Count got killed. The Mort sieged and took the castle. And then they came out of the castle and started killing everybody. And as far as he knows, he's the only survivor. And then he's really sad, eponymous about the whole situation. He regrets bringing all the others with him, like all the other knights and stuff that accompanied him here because they had families and stuff, and now they're all dead. Sad. Let's see. And at this point, we're like, hey, man, you get going. Go meet up with Sokius. We're going to take back the castle and see what we can do. And we also, part of the reason is like, oh, there's a Mort commander here. None of us have ever seen this Mort commander before. Let's go check that out. That takes us into chapter 7, and we're inside the castle. We discuss like what a Mort commander is. If we can cut off his head, the rest of the Mort will be like much more confused. Or while we're fighting, because the commander is like right here, it'll be a lot harder of a battle. But Luke is so excited. He's excited for blood. He just wants to kill and kill and kill. He's so excited. He's like, yes, killing a commander. This is gonna be great. So we go and we kill the commander, and he was pretty impressive. But as I mentioned previously, you just like surround him with all your guys, and then have one of your guys like attack, and then attack like. So that one guy might get counterattacked unless it's Luke or Karen, because then they can long range attack, so they don't get a counterattack, and then the rest of your guys just like their melee guys just beat the shit out of him. So he dies pretty quick. So Luke is like super pleased about this whole situation, and as we're about to head out, Sokius shows up, and it's like, hey, and he's like, the Mort are coming. A whole horde of them are coming into this town, so we can't just like mosey on out of here like we were planning. We have to go over the rooftops. Let's see. And then Sarah and Luke, so going to be another thing where Luke is like, yes, more blood. And then you can be like, do you want more blood, or do you want to be, let's sneak out of here? And it's like, of course I want more blood. Luke's my homie. And it's like, yay, more blood. So we like celebrate our bloodlust together. And then Sokius and Glenn are like, you two shut the fuck up. We got to survive and get back to the nest. Over the last couple levels, we found a few more relics. We got the second Tolferia tourism bulletin. It talks about a wildlife park, fun, and also a lake. And there's a mention about how like the Count gets thrown into the lake or climbs out of a lake or something, and then it's quite a sight to see the Count of Tolferia to coming out of the water and stuff. So I guess that's like an attraction here for some odd reason. Cool. Let's see. So the next relic was the Tolfurian recruitment poster, and it talks about the strength is in the defense and not in the attack. All right, sure, it's more propaganda. So then the Bard's travelogue is next. He writes a poem, and in the middle of like writing his poem, he gets interrupted, and he like writes this whole thing out. He's like, oh, the love upon the feathered trees and some bullshit, and then he's like, hey, what the? There's somebody coming out of the river. It's the Count. And then we get the diary of the Count, and he talks about how he hates being the eldest son. He doesn't want to be the Count. He never wanted to be the Count. He just wanted to like do art and shit. But that because he was the eldest, he got pushed in this role, and he's not charismatic, and he's not outgoing like all his brothers. And like, I had to marry this woman that doesn't like me because I'm kind of a bitch. And then we get a servant's diary, and the servant's diary is odd, to say the least. It's written by a maid, and her name's Susie, and she's writing to a friend, Camelia, and she's like, oh, if only I had never fallen in love with Lord Albert. And like this whole thing came up with like me and Lord Albert having like an affair and then wanting to get married, and then the Count and the Count's wife were like, that's cool, no problem. And she's like, I don't understand. Why does no one have a problem with this? How can nobles flirt with the maids here? In any other like sane place, they would be like, no, absolutely not. You cannot, connoiter, something like that, connoiter together and something. Oh, what was me? I get to be with the love of my life, even though he's a noble and I'm a maid and such. And it's like, okay. So then there's a bill of fare, and the bill of fare is just, it's like, get 6 potatoes. Like, what is this? And then there's a note about is a note in this one? Oh, and then there's a note that the king left a bunch of like biscuits from like some famous bakery in town for all the servants. So clearly the Count is like a he's a nice guy. Like, he's in a bad spot. He doesn't like where he's at. His wife's kind of a biatch, but he's still nice to the servants and takes care of them and stuff. Make sure they can marry nobles and whatnot without any problems. We get the bio of Lorthus. We find out that he's an honest young man, and also that he has a strong sense of justice, which often gets him into trouble. That he's an accomplished duelist, and yeah, he was kicking the shit out of Mort. And that he's an intelligence officer. But also, he's, dun dun dun, secretly a member of the royal family. Wow. So on to Chapter 8. We're trying to escape, and we have to kill our way through the Mort first. This pleases Luke, which pleases me. We clear them all out, and then we talk about, oh, dearest us, there's another fallen city. Hopefully Ludin will come to help, and we can stop having all these fallen cities that are destroyed by the Mort and everything. And then Luke mentions that it was Sokius' orders that caused the massacre from 2 years ago. What? Ooh, more about 2 years ago. Very interesting. Back at the nest, we get a cutscene. The girls are, like, Karen and Sarah are stocking up on supplies and, like, moving stuff around. When Naki, I think is his name, if I remember correctly, the boy we rescued, he approaches. And he's like, what you doing? And she's like, oh, we salvaged all these supplies from Tolfera. She just says, like, the town. And we're trying to distribute among everybody. Do you want to help? And he's like, yes, I would love to help. And so they walk, and we see a bunch of, like, Satapotamus refugees hanging out and stuff, being all Satapotami. And they're, like, chit-chatting about nothing. And then he starts talking about the Mort, and he's like, are you scared to fight the Mort? And she's like, oh, I'm very scared to fight the Mort. They're scary as shit. And he's like, how do you do it? And she's like, well, you got to do what you got to do. Gotta man up, son. That's what you got to do. And then he thanks her for being honest and encouraging him and stuff. And then we get like a flashback of her fighting some woman with a sword or something. And she's like, please don't thank me. I don't deserve your thanks. Jeez. Sad times. Glenn arrives at that point, and he's like, come on, Sarah, there's time for a strategy meeting. We got some more of the Count's diaries as relics. There's a whole diary just about him and his mother-in-law visiting and how she's like a shrew and a real cunt. And that she shows up and it's all criticism, and his wife who's already mean and doesn't like him gets even more mean and doesn't like him, but he suffers through it because the children love the mother-in-law, so that's fine. And then Diary 3 kind of keeps talking about the mother-in-law stuff, and that there's a real resemblance between the mother-in-law and his wife, and then he looks at his father-in-law and he's like, there's a resemblance between us too. That is a hollow of a man. He looks haunted. God, jeez. Oh man. So then we get the clap back from Camilla to Susie about her having to marry a lord. Oh, poor Susie, you're gonna marry a rich lord, go fuck yourself. Essentially is what Camilla says. She's like, hey, quit being an asshole. Just go marry that guy and have a good time. Damn. And it's like, oh, good job, Camilla. Too bad everyone's dead. And then we get another bill of fare, and in this one it just mentions that Camilla does foraging foraging expeditions into the woods to get mushrooms and stuff. But Ludin's army's on its way. The Morts have prepared like a way to stop them. They've gone up into this fort on this hill that overlooks like this valley they've got a fort up in a mountain, and they're like launching ballista attacks and like rocks and stuff down onto the army of Ludin. So we need to we need to go through this mine to get up to this fort to take them out. So we're going to surprise attack them from behind so they can stop surprise attacking Ludin. So Ludin can come over to the valley of Nitsa, or the plains of Nitsa, to help us out, be able to push them back. And that takes us to chapter 9. So now that we're in the mines, the crew starts just chatting about the mines, about stuff that's going on there. Glenn says he knows some stories about the mines, and that there's some like old woman who like stumbled upon and found the mines in the first place, and then the truth is like the queen's diadem or something came from here or whatever. And it's like, okay, cool, thanks for the side stories. Anyway, so we kill and fight our way through part 1 of the mines. There's like 3 parts of this mine experience, this arc. And then after we push through, Karen points out that Glenn's carrying around like this old map that he's using to get us through, and she's like, is this old map really that it's like really going to get us through, and is it really like what we need to be doing? And then Sarah's like, I have complete faith in Glenn. And then Lug's like, did you guys know Glenn was once captain of like a knight order? An order of knights? I can't remember if he doesn't say it like that. He doesn't come out and say it like that hard, but he's and then everyone's like, what? And he's like, yeah, it was a real old knight in shining armor. And then he teases Glenn some more. And then Glenn like shuts that the shit down. And then from the mine, and then, we have like our middle ground thing. And so from the mine, we get the foreman's report. We learn all about this foreman from this these mine relics. So the foreman just talking about how he likes to like hang out and have a good time, and that it's like super hot. But, it is what it is, and he loves his job. And then we get, like, a novice miner's report. And he's like, the foreman's lazy, he's messy, he's crude, I don't like him, he needs to be replaced. And that leads us into Chapter 10, where we continue through the mines. Karen tries to make peace between Glenn and Lug. From, like, the previous level, they were really starting to get after it against each other. And she, like, hard fails that. But after the battle, we kill the Mort and whatnot, we talk about what the plan is. And Lug mentions that the Ludin forces have dragged our names in the past. They're the ones, I think Rowan mentioned it before, calling us like Fallen Reapers or Faithless Reapers. There it is. And I don't know why we're helping these guys. And then Glenn reminds him that it's like, hey, we're helping them because they're going to help us. Man, sometimes you got to just suck it up and do it. And then we pick up some more journals from like the miners, like the Novus Miners Journal. It's just some guy complaining about being a miner, wishes he could have a book to read, and apparently he nodded off while writing, and the foreman wrote him a letter and gave him an order that he had to meet him at the mountaintop in the morning. Then the second foreman's report talks about how he's getting drunk, he's gonna be super rich, he's super excited to like hit a vein. And then we get the Novus Miners report, which is the follow-up to the complaint that he put forward. And he's like, I have to apologize, the foreman's great, please ignore me. So the foreman clearly found him and was like, hey bitch. Right? And so you can follow the progress, which is super funny because this whole story about the foreman and this guy complaining about it, and then a guy talking about how he hates being a miner and all this stuff, and the foreman like catches him, reads the stuff, and is like, you better get the fuck up here. And then he follows like a follow-up report where he's like, no, the foreman's great, he's gonna kick my ass if I don't tell him. Anyway, chapter 11, the Mort have like a very strong defense in this. But, whatever. We kill our way through. We just completely destroy this fort where they're like ballistian down to the Ludin forces so they can get over the Nysa plains. And that there's a commander here, and like, oh, we've never seen a commander before. This is going to be exciting. The commander of the whole forces in this area. So we kill them, and then hopefully they're all kind of like split up. And for this battle, we're joined by Rowan and Sokius. I don't know why they weren't like here before, but here they are now. So we fight our way through. And then the commander is just some like crone lady who doesn't attack or defend herself. She just keeps summoning these like bomb dudes. So there's a bunch of different morts, right? There's like arrow mort, and then big axe mort, and then shield and axe mort, and then we get like evokers, which are kind of like magic users, and then there's guys with like a flail, and the flail guy, he hits you, you get attack and defense down. And then we have these guys that like explode. So there's no real way to defend against them except to just dodge, which again makes Sarah the best character in the game because you can just jack that evasion and speed and stuff up to max. And these dudes will like launch themselves out to explode, and she'll just be like, dodge. While like Urs or Glenn, who are both kind of like tanky characters, if you like use their defensive skills, they're still gonna take a lot of it. It just like ignores defense, and that's the problem with like magic too. Like a magic essentially ignores their defensive stuff, while just missing always misses. It doesn't always miss, but it misses a lot. Like so. I think I lost Sarah. Sarah almost never takes damage, even if she does. I tend to be able to heal her up. And then your other characters start getting like some healing abilities as well. So you have like they all have like their Eustace Flask, which you can renew at like the Eustace Flask Renewal Center, which is like around. But then also you have these, they start getting healing skills, which just makes the whole game a little bit easier as well. So we take the fort, we kill her, and then Rowan and Sokius talk about how the Ludan army will be able to make it to the plains now. And can you start what's up? Oh, okay. And then Glenn is like staring off in the distance and just kind of like thinking about stuff. And then Rowan's like, "Hey, man, you doing okay?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm just reliving some old memories." And then Rowan then brings up the same thing that Luke brought up about him being like a knight. It's just like he's like, "Oh, you remember the times when you were like a knight in shining armor and all that stuff?" And he's like, "Oh, this." Like you used to take forts all the time, so this must be really like give you some like nostalgia stuff going on because it's like the same thing you were doing before. Glenn agrees with Rowan about the whole situation, and then he apologizes to Sarah. Technically, he apologizes to us as like the characters that are like the point of view characters for never telling her about his past. And then before he head back to Ness, he wants to kind of inform her about that. So he talks about how before he came to the Ashenhawk Brigade that he led an order of knights, but that the nation he served no more, that there was a battle between him and like before the Mort came, nations just like clashed all the time, and so his homeland was lost in one of these situations and he was set in irons and put to the gallows, but that the men in his service like saved him. And then they bade him to flee as they like sacrificed their life so that he could live. And then as part of this like destruction of his nation, he also lost his lover, and he has lots of regrets about the whole thing. And then we as Sarah tell him that we're glad that he's still alive, and he's also grateful for a second chance at life and a second chance at having a family. At this juncture, Luke interrupts, and he's like, "Hey man, I wasn't trying to mock you before. I just want to resolve our like fight, because I guess when they first met, they had like a battle, but then Rowan broke it up. So Luke still wants to know who like the better fighter is. The better fighter is Luke, but he does so much damage, and Glenn just like takes it like a bitch. But he still wants to know. So after the Mordor are defeated, he wants to have a fight. And then Glenn's like, "Yes, I will do that as soon as when we're done." So heading back to the nest, Glenn and Sarah are in like they're just practicing sword fighting and knife fighting and all that stuff together. While the boy Naki, he's watching, and then he comes up and he's like, "Hey, can you teach me how to fight? I'm tired of being afraid." And meanwhile, Lug is just kind of like hanging out, taking like a pretend napsopotamus nearby. And as Glenn starts to like teach him how to like use a sword and defend himself, Lug makes like he's like a bunch of bleeding hearts. So good. Later on in the same kind of like cutscene series, because we switched over to like a new arc, Sarah is having like a nightmare again. We're back at the snowy field. She sees the woman that she was fighting earlier, but now she's dead. She gets up because she woke up, and she's just wandering around going for a little walksy, and that's when she sees Rowan just like standing there staring at the moon or whatever. They talk a little bit about Naki, about the refugees, about how when Sarah joined the Hawks, and that she was the same age as Naki, and that she had no skills, and that he had to teach her, and he has the same fighting style that she does, and that she's become very, very good. And that she's concerned that Naki's gonna have the same experience as her, that he'll start fighting and kind of be stuck in this cycle of like fear and like fighting for his life and stuff. And they talk about fear generally, and then like the incident that happened a few years ago, or that she's obviously having nightmares about, and that people keep kind of hitting around. talk about. They kind of like briefly bring that up, and then Rowan mentions that there's more terrifying things than death. And that takes us to our like interlude section. So we got another bio section for Glenn. And besides just the fact that his nation lost, we found out that he was betrayed. There was another battalion in his like brigade that for the nation that was kind of betrayed them, and so which is the reason they lost against this other nation, and why there was this whole thing. And he was very mad about that whole situation. We only got one relic from the fort, and it's the Crooked Merchant's Note number 2. So this time he's like chatting to his like little homie, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I found this old bird walking around in the woods, and she was all lost, and I was going to go rob her. I was like, I got a club. I'll just go knock her out, take her stuff." And as he's walking up to her, she starts crying and thanking him for saving her. And he's like, she seems pretty rich. I can like charm her up and steal even more stuff. So he does that. And he's like, you better eat this before anyone sees it. So as we start the next chapter, we get Rowan has gotten word that the Luden forces have successfully reached the Niza Plains, where the main forces of the Mort are just kind of like hanging out, and that they need support from the Ashnok Brigade. So Rowan is going to go hit like this main gate or the main camp or whatever where the Mort are, while Sarah and the other crew, we're going to head through like this river, the river of Moldova, to do like a side strike, so we can hit them from like 3 sides at once. So as chapter 8 begins, we arrive at the river and we find that there's a whole bunch of civilians running around here, so we got to save them. You don't have to save them. When you save them, you get like more extra experience. So I don't know if I mentioned this, but so you get experience for killing dudes, and then at the end of each level you get like rated on a scale from like, I don't know, the lowest I've gotten is C and the highest is A, so I don't know if there's any more than that, but and for every civilian you say, and then you get like a certain amount of experience. Usually it's like upwards of to like 50 or so, maybe more. But if you say, for each civilian you save, you get like an extra, it's a lot. It's like an extra 10 to 20 somewhere in there. So if you save all, I think there's 5 of them, then you get a whole bunch of extra like experience. And this experience does not go to any particular character, but it's used to like catch characters up essentially, which is a nice addition. That'd be nice if they had something like that in like Shining Force games, because sometimes you get like characters like way ahead of everybody else, and you just kind of got to let them sit on the sideline while everyone tries to catch up. But it's pretty easy. The civilians, like shockingly, I was like, oh, this is going to be such a headache. But it's not. They just kind of run to the exit, so you just got to like post some people up, like pretty much Sarah and Luke, because at this point Luke has an ability where he attacks first. And so since I'm cheating, I have that maxed out. So I just like plot him out, and then these dogs come running up to him, and they're pretty weak. So he'll just like, they attack him and he kills them first, and the next one attacks and he kills them first. Like he does the counter attack first. And then Sarah's like impossible to hit, right? Not impossible, but I think like the dogs have like an 8% chance, and so they just never hit. And so then she counterattacks and kills him in one hit. So they just like are demolishing everything. So obviously Luke and Sarah are like racking in the levels. Like at some point Sarah's like level 22 and like Urs is level like 16, just because he's so fucking slow. It doesn't do that much damage. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. So we save the civilians, we push forward, we kill all the Mort. At the end of the battle, Luke mentions that he was talking to one of the civilians, and they told him that the Luden forces got trashed by the Mort. And that when the knights died, the civilians who were like part of the entourage, they all fled. And that's where these guys are, and we send them back to the nest. Urs has a lot of doubts about the main force being completely destroyed, but we should hurry regardless. Some of the relics we find in the river, one of them was the Fisher King, and it's a story about how this Moldova river got its name. Apparently... Whew, sorry. This whole area was invaded by some large water creature, like some monster, and that it was ruining the fishing spot, and that the fishing guys tried to do something about it, but they just have like fishing rods or whatever. Anyway, this dude came along and just shot it in the eye with an arrow, and they declared him the Fisher King, and his name was Moldova, so they called it Moldova River. We start picking up like old novels too, and they just have like these funny stories. It's like Holy Knight's Revenge, and you can't read them, but then we see like the back, and the back talks about like a knight captain who's betrayed and exiled, and then he returns later to find the betrayer on the throne, and what's he gonna do? And then there's after we get through the river, chapter 13, we hit up a town on the way, and the whole thing's been like destroyed by the Mort. And there's still a lot of them just kind of hanging around and like, all right, we got to push through and kill them all. And this is where we can start getting the evokers, the wizard guys. And like I said, like with Sarah, it doesn't really matter, but with Urs and Glenn, you got to kind of like hide everybody and just let Sarah go handle them, essentially, in the archer, because she can shoot long range. But they go down really quick, but they don't do like that much damage, but it's just like there's no defense against them really besides just dodging. And while Karen has a decent amount of like dodge, it's nowhere near like Sarah's like beefed up with all her stats and her like maxed out stuff. Let's see. Luke keeps taking out dogs, always good. And then at some point after the battle, Glenn mentions that it's interesting that we're fighting for people who hate us and think we're just like a bunch of nuisances or whatever. We get some more relics here, like a bunch of them. There's one about an aquatic threat that have caused problems and have kind of made rationing a little more tight, and that maybe is referencing that Fisher King story or whatever. There's another public bulletin that just talks about how there's a large creatures that have been spotted and that everyone's supposed to go to like the evacuation points. And obviously if they didn't, they got killed here by these guys. We get another Bard's Travelogue. He's the one who like saw the count earlier. He's writing poetry again. He's like, damn it, it's so hot here. I'm going to go for a swim. So he might have got eaten up by that monster. We then get the old novel part 2. So what happens in part 2? So he gets his revenge, and then I guess like he gets reborn in like another life or reincarnated, and so now he has to go get a sword and he has to complete some trial, and then he can get like revenge again. And then he has like a girlfriend who's a ghost, and she's like, just come with me and be a ghost husband instead of getting vengeance. And what will he choose? Well, there's an old novel 3 later on, so he clearly chooses vengeance. So we finally arrive at this like fort with the Mort leader. And as we're about ready to like hit the side here, so we can, because Rowan and Sokius this whole time, they attacked like one side to be a distraction, so we could come in and hit like the commander, so that we could like relieve the Luden forces that are on the other side. So we're doing like this 3-way attack. But as soon as we roll up, Rowan and Sokius show up and they're like, hey, what's up? We're here. And they're like, oh, what's going on? And Glenn is like super surprised. And he's like, Rowan's like, I got bored. And Sokius is like, this is a very bad idea. And Rowan's like, maybe, tee-hee-hee. It was a bad idea. But they decided to go ahead and break through so that he could be a part of like the Ashen Hawk Brigade's moment of triumph. And the boss here is like this really big boy, and he pretty much hits everyone within melee range, which is, you know, it doesn't do that much damage. And then if everyone's in melee range, it means when I do an attack, I attack like 6 times. So he goes down pretty quick. Completely destroyed. And the reason why is because, of course, friendship is magic. The more friends we have, the more we can surround, the more we can attack, and guys just get, they get like murked so fast. And then at that point, everyone's like, hey, it's pretty quiet. Too quiet. Where's the sound of the Luden army? And then he's like, oh no, we got played. We played right in the heads of the Mort. They tricked us. And Sokius runs in. He's like, the nest is under attack. No. So before we go deal with that, we got some more relics. So like I said, we got the old novel 3. It's the Holy Knight's Vengeance, like 5 or 2.5 or whatever. This time the guy was reincarnated. He's been reincarnated 7 times. And now the rival that like betrayed him and that he wanted to get, you know, his like ghost wife told him not to go after or whatever. Now it's his twin sister in like this new reincarnation or whatever. And it's like, and she doesn't have any recollection about any of this rivalry bullshit or anything. And he's like, should I kill my twin sister who's a child or not? Dun, dun, dun. And it's some like real anime bullshit this story has become. And I guess like, fuck Charlotte. We chose not to hang out with our ghost wife, which is bad call in my opinion. We then get a pretty extensive cutscene. The Mort are just running around, striking down refugees and killing people. People are running. The whole place is on fire. We see like a cutscene finally with the lizard dog things that are cool. And they're having like a little snackopotamus on some of the refugees. And then we show up. We start killing and killing and killing. It looks like Naki's still alive. And Sarah's like, Naki! And she runs off to like rescue him. And then Rowan and Sokius, they're like killing dudes. And they were kind of off on their own thing. And then they run into like these 2 like very impressive looking knights of Mort that are bitches. They kill him real fast when he actually gets to the battle. And then this like super badass motherfucker who's like glowing blue eyes and glowing blue chest, and he's just got this big fucking sword and like full armor, and it's like ruh-roh. So that takes us into chapter 15, where we are tasked with defending Naki so that he can escape. And Naki is a real asshole in this. So we have had various different times when we like rescue the what's his name, Lorden or whatever, the emissary from Luden. And he like stuck around with us. We've had other times with Sokius or Rowan are with us, and they just like stick around with us. Naki just like runs for the exit, and so you have to like race after him as fast as humanly possible. And there's like treasure and shit in this, and so I stopped to like get the treasure. But as soon as you get to the end, as soon as you get Naki to the end, the level doesn't end until everybody escapes, so that you can just like mosey on back and like clear anything else you want to clear and pick up all the treasure. And then, which I would advise, because it looks like that you cannot come back to this level as a skirmish level. Because after I beat it, I glanced at the skirmishes. Every now and then I just look, and this level was not listed as a skirmish level. So I highly advise, especially if you're not cheating, because you want to get all the goodies, that you after you rescue Naki, then you kind of like let your characters meander back and just pick up all the goodies because the bad guys don't keep coming, right? And the whole time, the other awful thing about this level is that Sokius and Rowan are like in a separate battlefield, but you have to watch them, and they easily kill the two guards. But then the bad guy, they just like fight, and eventually the bad guy kills like Sokius, but him and Rowan just keep going back and forth, and Rowan does like 2 damage to him, and then the bad guy like misses, and this goes on the entire battle, and it's just like it drags out because it's like, do I need to see this? Can't they just be like they're off fighting on their own? I guess not. It was very important for me to sit here every turn and watch them just like waste a minute and a half of my life trying to do this dumb battle. It was real bad. Like this whole level, I mean, besides like just normal playing the game, which was good, like the normal battle stuff, but it's like, and Naki wasn't that annoying. It was just like, first I was like, okay, I'll like split my team sometimes and be like, there's 2 guys over here and a treasure. I'm going to kill them, get that treasure, and then everyone else will go this way. And I did that, and Naki got killed because I wasn't following him close enough. So then I had to play it again, even with cheating, right? So this time I was like, okay, everybody just follow Naki, and like I'll pick up treasures on the way. I'll just send Sarah or Karen because they have the longest range of running. All right, let's see. Okay, yeah. So, and again, the level's just kind of long and boring. A lot because it just like kills your time. Like the actual playing of the level's fine. If it was just the Naki thing, that's totally okay. Like I made a mistake, I accept that mistake. That's my bad. But the whole thing with like having to watch Rowan do his like fucking battle over his obviously he's gonna lose battle. And near the end of the battle, we're coming to save you now. And he's like, no, you must run. And I'm like, I don't know, man, you're doing 2 hit points to this guy, and he doesn't have that many hit points. I think we could come, and he misses like all the time. I think Sarah would beat the shit out of him, even though he's like level 40, and most of my guys are like around level 20 plus at this point. But yeah, this is like kind of the only level where I was like, oh, what the fuck is this? Let's see. Okay, and then at the end, once everyone escapes, we get a cutscene, and we see Rowan get turned up by this guy, and Sokius gets like stabbed while he's on the ground, and Rowan gets stabbed for good, and everyone's just watching and being like, no! And then Rowan's like, go to Jezza right now before I get murked. And then Luke and Sarah are about to like run back to help, and Urs and Glenn have to like grab them to stop them, and the whole cutscene's like very dramatic. It's very good. It's very enjoyable to watch, but very sad at the same time. All right, at this juncture, it's time to gather up all the survivors and head to Jezza Village, which is in the dark life forest, and then with the Mort hot on our trails. So we get some more defending Naki levels. Hooray! Which are kind of bad, but at this point I know I just gotta follow him, and once I beat the level I can go back and do whatever. At this point I send Sarah off on her own because she single-handedly can just like murder everything. Like she almost never gets hit. Like I think the most I've seen a chance for her to be hit is sitting around at this point in the game like 12%, which is like 0. Like she might get hit 1 time per battle, and she can eat that hit. So like whatever. So good job, Mort. Slow clap for you hitting her once. After we completely slaughter all them, Glenn and Urs talk about our escape, and then Karen brings up the Luden army and how they're probably not much better off than we are, and this whole like enterprise kind of got fucked. And then we talk some more about how the Mort are much better at strategy than initially thought, and move on with our day. So the relics in this level we found. There's a map piece. Someone seems to have kind of drawn a map and then torn it up and then tossed it. And then we get the merchant's notes about a big city. And this is like a merchant. He's like, y'all, I fixing to go to a big city, Tolferia, and do whatever. And so he's having a blast and talking about how he's going to bring stuff back to his grandma, and then he's headed back to Jezza. So then we continue forward, and it's time to make our stand here at the Jezza village. And at this point, Lou's kind of like losing it. And so he goes off ahead to do himself. And everyone's like, fuck you doing, man? Quit being a baller. And get back over here with the rest of them. And he's like, rah, fuck you. I'm just going to kill Morts and die. He does go down. But, the game doesn't punish you for that. It's just like, oh, well, you couldn't handle it. After the battle, Glenn and Lug start fighting again, like physically fighting. And then everyone tries to get them to calm down, specifically Urs. Lug finally says he's going to go back and get Rowan. He doesn't want to leave him, like no man left behind. And he doesn't believe that Rowan's dead and all that. And then finally Sarah steps in and she's like, Luke, stop it. And like slaps the shit out of him. She doesn't do that, but she gets him. And she's like, I don't lose any more of my family. This is ridiculous. And she finally like snaps Lug out of his like whatever thing is. And he's like, I'm sorry. And he gets totally stunned by like her whole thing about being family and whatnot. And then Glenn's like, come on, just come with us to Jezza, and then if you want to go back and find Rowan, then we can, but at least we take care of the refugees. And he's like, all right, I'm sorry. And then he apologizes to everybody. And then Karen and Yr's like, wow, Luke apologizing. I never thought I'd see the day. And then Karen's like, well, it was almost an apology. And he continues. Luke keeps talking about how he's unsure what to do with himself. And he's just, I don't know, he's like losing it. And then Urs is like, yeah, I have the same questions, but we got to keep moving on. The relics we found here are a naturalist journal. This one's kind of funny. There's several layers to this, but the first one, he talks about getting tricked by the children and about these like animal tracks that he thought were like a monster, but it's actually just a bear. And then he's trying to grow these plants, and he's having a hard time because of lack of rain, and he complains about how humans grow with no problem, and these like asshole kids keep bothering him. And then he talks about this merchant who came by and tried to buy plants, and he's like, fuck that guy. I'm gonna get my sickle and chase him off. And so he does. And then the old merchant from Tolfur. Yep, that's the merchant who tried to buy the flowers from this guy. He's like, I was walking along when I saw these purty flowers, and I was like, I could grant some flowers, and I went to talk, and this guy says, crazy man started chasing me, and I was like, oh shit, better go back to Jezza. God damn, people are less crazy over there. They're also all dead, but we'll get to that in a minute. So we enter Jezza Village, and ta-da, the mortar here. Yeah, Lorthos is also here. He's an emissary fellow from Ludin, and he's in a lot of trouble. And I guess Naki's okay and the rest of the refugees because we don't have to deal with their assholes, but we do have to protect Lorthos at this point. So at least we don't have to escort him anywhere, and he can fight back, and he tends to just like tag along with whoever, so he barely does shit all, which is fine with me. Still, we need to keep an eye on him though, because he doesn't, you know, he can't get killed, so we gotta like protect him from his own stupidity of not just like hanging back while we just murder everybody. And then after we kill everybody here, we clear out Jezza. We ask him, hey man, what's going on? Why are you here? What's up? And then at some point during like the battles, he explains that Ludin got burked. Sorry, I'm a little sick still. They got completely murked, and so he'd run into Rowan at some point, and he's like, hey, if any shit goes down, go to Rowan Village, and you know we'll take care of you there. And he's like, oh, okay. So we tell him about. He's like, oh, speaking of which, where's your boss? And he's like, oh, he died and got murdered by this guy. And he's like, oh shit, yeah, that was really bad. And then he kind of explains more about the Ludin army losing. They had huge amounts of numbers, but they just did not expect the ferocity and the love of slaughter that the Mort had. And so after they kind of got routed, Lorthos grabbed whoever he could and rallied everybody because he's like a true hero. And then headed to Jezza. And then Glenn and Lorthos supposed to talk about how there's still hope, and that there's a fort called Lorica, and some named Levant who is grabbing refugees like from wherever. As long as you're, essentially his whole thing is like, oh, as long as you hate the Mort, you're welcome here. And then someone refers to him as the Mad Tiger of Calicia, however you want to pronounce it. Anyway, that nation, Calicia, fell to the Mort, and that he rallied his people, went and built this fort like up in the mountains, and has been like holding out for a while. And then Urs is like, oh yeah, I know that guy. We fought multiple times. And everyone's like, what? It's like, yeah, he's an honorable dude. I don't know how much he likes me, but you know, he's always good. He's a good fight. And then he didn't like backstab people or do dishonorable things or whatever. Even in the bloodiest of all battles, I have a lot of respect for that guy. And it's like, cool, let's go. And Lorthos is like, hey, I'm going to stay here. And it's like, what? And he's like, I got wounded. I got wounded to tend to. And then I'm going to head back to Ludin for more reinforcements. And it's like, all right, well, we got to find a ship so we can head over to Lorica. And to get there, there's this port nearby called Port Amon, so we can take all the refugees, go get a boat, and then head across the ocean there. So the relics we find in Jezza here, we find an old diary. It's talking about a man who was saved by some other man who went to start a mercenary band. So that might be like Rowan, someone talking about Rowan back in the day or whatever. That's what I would assume why it's here. We get the Naturalist Journal Part 2. It's more about plant shit and stuff and about some bird thing he's trying to raise from an egg. And then more problems. Like those fucking kids, and you get off my lawn and shit like that. And then he talks about he's going to create some plant thing to like punish them. They're going to come try to eat like delicious berries, and it's going to poison them or something. It's gonna make them all fat, and then he can like drain their blood. Like it got real dark. And then we find the merchant's note. The one he's dead, of course, because everyone's dead. It's a dark fantasy world. But it's the merchant who went to like get the plants, and he went to go to Torfrina, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna leave. I don't know if I'm gonna make any money down in the big city or whatnot, but I'm gonna go see if I can figure it out. And he had quite the journey before the Mort came here and killed him and his family and everything. So that's nice. What's funny is Gran's probably, died before the Mort got here. She seemed pretty sick from what he's talking about. And so at this point, it's time to head to Lorica. So we got to tow the refugees and head over there. Or no, we're going to head to Port Amon. so we can take a boat over to Lorica, and everything should be good at that point. All right, so at this point, we're traveling around, and then we get to this bridge, which is going to take us over to like the port town, and it's torn the shit up. So the Mort have been trying to like destroy this thing apparently, and now they're all just like hanging out, waiting for us to come and massacre them. So we do. But before Lou says, "Not a problem, stress relief." I love him. And this time Glenn's like, you know what? I agree. So we kill all the Mort, secure the bridge. And then one of the civilians in like our pack, he stops us before we continue, and he's like, "Thank you so much. We like gathered this thing from like Jezza or from the nest before we left, and we're like, oh no, we can't accept this. We're just here to help and blah 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 blah. And you shouldn't be thanking us. A lot of people have died." And they're like, "Bro, we're the only reason any of us are alive is because you guys like really appreciate it." Naki like steps in to say some stuff and whatever. And finally we like, all right, give it to us. And it's a fucking second Eustace flask, which is excellent. And they don't call it Eustace flask in this. I don't know what the fuck they call it, but essentially in every battle everybody can use like a healing flask, like Eustace flask, like once. And now we can use them twice. And then those little areas that like charge up our Eustace flask, they charge up both of them. So it's like, this is a huge improvement. Like this is like, wow, game changing. This is like more game changing than a lot of other stuff in this game. Like I was like, damn, finally. So that was super nice. So thank you, baller. Also on the bridge, we've got some more information about the bridge building escapades and what went down and whatnot, because we find a bridge builder's logbook. Let's talk about building the bridge. Apparently there was a storm of the century here. It wrecked everything, injured everybody, but eventually they finished it. It was actually like a really cute story. And we find like a sullied map, which is literally just a sullied map. All right, whatever. So, of course, there's more at the port. Time to fight. Luke goes down again, because I forget he's a glass cannon. I sent him too far out. Still, Sarah carries most of the level because she's completely invincible. So afterwards, Glenn checks on everyone, and we find out that apparently Karen can sail a ship. And not just a little boat, a big-ass ship. One big enough for us and all the refugees. And then Karen and Lou get into a funny discussion about her being from a forest, not mountains, by the way. Ending in him calling her Tree Lady. The relics we find here are sailors' memoirs. This guy talks about the chakram, or the chakram. Apparently they can jump real high, they're real good at math, and everyone thinks they're barbarians, but they're really not. He also talks about how great it is to sail and how more people should do it. We get the Bard's Travelogue number 3. He's writing a poem for a girl, but it failed. Wah, wah, wah. So then we head further into the actual port of the port town, and there we find a boat, plus Mort. Always more. Luke mentions that he used to be a talented thief as well as being a murderer, and we kill our way through. Karen checks out the ship, and since she's an excellent sailor, apparently, she says the ship's good to go. Naki gets assigned to get all the refugees settled in and whatnot, and then while we discuss about Levante and him letting us in, Urs is going to head in there. He's going to talk to the Mad Tiger once we arrive, and then he will for sure take the refugees, even if he doesn't take the quote-unquote faithless reapers, who is all of us. Urs reveals that he, again, fought with him several times, and at that point we take the ship across the frozen lands, and then we get a sweet cutscene where the crew's sitting outside this giant gate of this awesome-looking fort where Levant comes out, or Levante. He's got a very similar model to Rowan, to be honest. I don't know if it's just because they're both old, but none of the models in this are super, super good. They're good enough, I feel, but anyway, Glenn starts talking to Levant, but then he interrupts him. He's like, I've already heard everything from Urs, who's standing right there. He's like, I hate this motherfucker, but I know he's honest. So if he's telling me there's issues, you can all come and stay. And the fort stands for anyone who fights against the Mort. The Mort, goddamn. I don't know if this whole rhymed when I was writing it out. At that point, Glenn and Levante shake hands and agree to work together. But the situation's not great. The fort is surrounded by Mort, and Glenn states that he will fight. Levante speaks well of Rowan and Socius, how they met in battle and how they were honorable men. He talks about Troden. This is the event from 2 years ago, about how the Faithless Reapers, yada yada. Anyway, come on in. So then at that point, we get the bio for Levante. He was a general of a small nation which was destroyed by the Mort. Which we already knew. Extremely kind. He once sought to suicide himself by combat, but during the Mort invasion he changed his mind, and he continues to command raids on the Mort, and that he was born in a wealthy merchant family, but that he cut ties with them when he was around 12 years old. We find the last of the crooked merchant's notes, and apparently that old woman was more of a rogue than he is, because she knew that he was a rogue, and she brought him back to her place and said, hey, you can take whatever you want, but if you want, you can stick around here and live a better life. And so the guy starts like, whatever, fuck you, old lady, and he starts casing the place and loading up his wagon. She wanders out while he's like filling up the wagon and just chats about him with his past and whatnot. And at some point, she's able to change his heart. And then in this letter he's sending to his buddy, he's like, oh, so now we're living together and I'm working on a potato harvest. And he's like, hey, I'm sorry for treating you so poorly this time. Here's a map of where we're at if you want to come join us. Then we get the Sailor's Memoirs Part 2. It talks about Tartarka, which is a moving island that is maybe a turtle. It's the last island he visited, and not that is not the island he visited, but the last island he visited sucked. Children are throwing rocks at him, and then he starts talking about flying boats and how he's heading into a land of rainbows or something. We then find out that Ludin is sending a rescue mission to come rescue the people of the fort with Lurica. But they may be too late, and that there's a whole contingent of Mort hanging out at this place called the Tukums Cathedral, and so the Ashen Hawk Brigade is going to go clear that out so that the people can have a chance to get away. And so we head over to the cathedral. This arc is like 3 levels long. The first area is crawling with Mort. Obviously, we kill them all. And at one point, there's like this evoker that I thought was the boss character of this, and he just sits there and does nothing. I literally sent Luke and Karen over there, and they just kick the shit out of him. After that, Luke and Karen discuss how he loves murder. And Karen's like, no, I'm not a big fan of murder. It's like, what about you, Sarah? And then our response, because this is an area where we get to pick, we're like, it's complicated. We have a complicated relationship with the act of murder. And then again, Sarah gets really Debbie Downer, talks about having no right to be happy. Karen agrees with her. And then we all think about Troden. Good old Troden. And then they talk about how it's as if time stopped on that day. And Lug is like, whatever, YOLO, got to keep living your life. What the fuck would we do any differently? Even if we go back in time, then what? Are we going to do something different? And when we find out more about it, it's like, yeah, what would they do any different? I don't know why they're being such satapotamus about this whole thing, to be completely honest. And then he mentions that there's no way they could have settled things without killing innocents. And that we're all murderers, our hands are all stained, but our hands were all stained long before Troden. And before the Ashen Hawks. We made our choices. There is no redemption. He then walks off. Karen mentions that Lug is not all tough, and that not as tough as he pretends to be, and that this was actually him trying to cheer her and Sarah up. Sarah then talks about not really knowing the rest of the team that well. Karen gets a little defensive about it, but she drops it at that point. So in this level, we picked up the priest diary, and this is like the new kind of like story we're going to be carried across this arc. It talks about a priest. He's become very fearful. He knows that there's like monsters coming, but he doesn't want to scare everybody by letting them know. So he's just trying to do things as normal. He does tell an acolyte, and we get an acolyte's diary as well. It talks about he's super sad about the coming monsters, about his end, and then he's super mad at the priest told him that they were coming. Once they're inside the cathedral, of course, it's packed full of Mort. So too bad they've been tearing this place up. It used to look really nice and whatnot. So we secure the cathedral, and then we head back. Urs at some point is just sitting contemplatively, staring off, and Sarah asks if he's okay. He mentions that, hey, Sarah, you've changed. You used to not care about anybody but yourself. And she's like, okay, what's on your mind? And he then talks about this village of fighters that he was born in, who they revered a god of calamity, and that, from there he sold his axe to the highest bidder. And that one day he failed to notice that there was treachery from like the lord he was serving, and he was enslaved. And, he was held fast by his pride, essentially. And he was really upset until he learned there were other proud fighters in the world, like the Vante, who always called him a bastard. But after Troden, he just feels like he lost his honor forever. In that level, we find the Priest Diary 2, who talks about the final meal, still waiting for the monsters, missing all the children and whatnot. In the Acolyte's Diary, he's talking about how the church is silent, and it looks like he went around and killed everybody to make sure they weren't killed by the Mort. He took care of that himself, and now he's all by himself, and he's thinking about killing himself as well. But does he do it? I don't know, probably. So we return back to the fort, and we find Lorthos. He is here to give us information about Ludin's mission. That they're going. Okay. So first, Glenn questions him. He's like, "Why'd you come alone? You didn't come with anybody." And then Lorthos is like, "Yeah, there's a lot of trouble on the way over here." And so what happened was all the troops that kind of got destroyed by the Mort forces beforehand, they're held up in like this area. Ludin's sending like a giant, like an actual force, like their entire army down here. This which assumably is going to destroy the Mort, but they're going down to like rescue these troops. And that they're willing to help the people of Lorica, but they got to like move somewhere else to be picked up along the way because they're not going to go out of their way to do it. So we have to get the people of Lorca out of the fort and down to like this other area, Erkson or something. And to do that, we have to clear a path, and that path is going to take us, let's see, to the to like another hangout spot with the Mort to kind of get rid of them. And this isn't a graveyard, and so this to get to the graveyard, we got to go like to like this first area, and then we got to go through like a cave, and then we hit the graveyard, and that's like the next arc. So then we go to that, we clear out the initial area, and then after the battle, Lug jokes around, or starts to get super serial. And he mentions that all this blood on the snow reminds him of Troden, because I guess it was snowing when the whole thing went down. And then Glenn mentions that he lost his honor that day as well. And then Lug is like, well, at least you had honor to lose. Then he states, as a murderer by trade, that day was just another Tuesday. Karen's about to speak up, but then she doesn't. And then we tell the boys to go on ahead because Karen's got a little tiny wound we want to take care of. Glenn doesn't get the hint at first. He's like, oh, let me help too. And Lug's like, bro, come on, let's go. And so they leave. It takes them away. So then we can have some girl talk with Karen. So Karen admits that she too enjoyed the murder profession before joining the Hawks. She then tells Sarah her tale. She grew up in an idyllic village in the woods, but she can never return there. Her father was duped by a wicked merchant. And when the father died, she was banished as well. And she vowed vengeance against the merchant. Tracked him down, killed him. And then at that point, she felt like just as bad as he was. Like she's no better off than the guy who got her dad killed. She joined the Hawks to pretend that she wasn't. But after Troden, ... she knows she's the villain, just like the rest of them. We got Karen's bio gets updated at this point. Identifies that she was born a woodwalker, that her people vanished for some, or her people were banished for some past sin from like the rest of the people in the area, and that her specific town were called the Sinners. They're obviously supposed to be some sort of elf type people. She's not an elf; it never gets identified as that, but she's got like all the traits of an elf except pointed ears, and then like the wood thing and bows and all that shit. Anyway, her mom was lost to an early illness, and her father really wanted the wood walkers to open up to stop being such isolationists, which of course always turns out bad. So he started attending business with some merchant in the area, got a lot of people to invest. It all seemed good. Things were working out well. And then the merchant later discussed opening up another tannery and a hunting post on a nearby mountain. And then once that tanning post was all done, 5 hunters went out to go start working there, and then they never came back, and the merchant disappeared. And when they went out there to check on it, the outpost was completely razed, and they eventually found out that the hunters were sold into slavery by the merchant, who ran away with all the money that was invested. And then also the merchant had used some of the money he had stolen. He had used the successful tannery that the woodwalkers had set up to get a bank from. He essentially sold it to like a bank to get a huge loan, and then when he pieced out, the woodwalkers lost the tannery as well. They all blamed her father because he was the only one who wanted, because they all wanted to stay isolationists, and so he did killed himself. So sad times. The only relic we find is a snow-covered note, and it's like, please save that guy, I'm probably already dead. We're homies. Anyway, so next up is the cave. We're ready to do the cave and then the graveyard. And the only thing we find here, we just crush through, kill it. No extra bios, none of that stuff. We just find a drop note. And it mentions that a boy is injured but not dead. Please go find him. All right, so finally at the graveyard, we wipe out the Mort, kill some big guys. And this gives the people of the fort a fighting chance. So after we clear the graveyard, Karen brings up the size of the encampment at the fort, that there's no way everyone can go at the same time. And then Glenn's like, I got a plan. And then we get a cutscene. The group's talking to the General Levant. The confirmation... they confirm that there's a clear path ahead. Lorthos brings up the difficulty of moving everybody at once, and then Glenn's like, here's my plan. We move that in stages. We start with all the weakest, and we finish with the best fighters, the best fighters being the Ashen Hawk Brigade. So there's going to be 3 chalks. The first chalk's going to be all the weak, the injured, the people who can't fight, all that stuff, because the Mort's already cleared out. So by the time the Mort figure out what's going on, they're going to initially have to run into the second chalk, which is going to be Levant and his like guards, right, who are not as strong. And then the Ashen Hawk Brigade's going to wait around until the very end to make sure everyone else gets through. And then we get some close-up shots of Sarah, and she is a babe, as I mentioned before. Anyway, so at that point, Glenn's like, you don't have to stay. If you want to go with the further one, you can come down. And then everyone's like, no, we're going to stay. Karen's like, I'm down. Sarah's like, no, for sure. Luke's like, I want to kill more Mort, so Loyo. YOLO, and then Lorthos is gonna. So we talk. It's like, okay, after when they get hooked up with the Lunan forces, they're gonna send a hawk, and that means we're free to retreat. But until that point, we have to hold this area to like lure the Mort in and make sure they don't go after that force over there. And they're like, what happens if a hawk never shows up? And it's like, we wait 3 days and then we go, because the general is gonna go after like the first day. Anyway, so later on, Glenn is talking to the general. He's only gonna have like half his men after the first round because he's sending a lot of the weak ones or the ones with families ahead. And then again, they talk about the Ashen Hawk history, and it gets mentioned that they were packet killers. They turned on their employer, and they killed a whole bunch of innocent people. At the same time, Sarah's talking to Naki, and he's like, "Why? Why are you staying here? We could all easily get away." And Sarah states that she wants everyone to survive, and that she needs to stay behind to make sure that happens. And at this point, we're going back and forth between Sarah, who's talking to Naki, and Glenn, who's talking to Levant. So going back to Levant and Glenn, he asks why the Hawks are staying behind. And Glenn tells him that they slaughtered enemies and they slaughtered innocents, therefore they slaughtered themselves, right? Which feels like a mistranslation. But anyway, back to Naki and Sarah. It brings up that he heard about what happened at Atroden and how they're faithless, but he doesn't believe they're faithless because they've done all this stuff. They sacrificed everything to like help the people, the refugees, and that he just can't believe it. And then she states what Rowan stated before, that there's worse things than death. And then she gives him her necklace, which is she mentions has always protected her and helps her fight her fear, but that she doesn't need it anymore, so he can use it. He then says he's been waiting for her in Luden, and she's like, I know. That last level, we got a couple relics. We got another dropped note. This time it's begging for a friend or partner to be alive. And then the Gravekeeper's journal, where this guy's just talking about he found a dead kid after following a trail of blood, and that he's tired from digging graves, which if you've been following along, that dead kid is the one mentioned from the previous drop note. So chapter 27 is when the onslaught begins. And then Levant and his troops decide to come out. Instead of like running out, they're going to stay behind and help us with the initial rush of Mort troops. And they are completely worthless. Garbage. They do like 1 point of damage, and one of their guys even dies. And I'm just like, you're just getting in the way. Just fucking go. Levant's okay. He does a decent amount of damage, I guess. Oh, shoot. I hit a button. Hold on. My notes. There we go. Okay. Him and Urs trade some friendly barbs, which is fun. Like, it's a good thing I didn't kill you when I had the chance. Oh, my memory serves me correctly. I was winning that battle. And it's like, oh yeah, after this fight, we'll settle things for good. And it's like, all right, cool. So we kill the shit out of the Mort as usual. Then we get another cutscene. The first group, after resting for the day, so like we see Lorthos and Naki. They get through like the first day of travel, and then they're resting. And they're speaking. And finally, we get to figure out what the fuck happened in Troden. So, and it's not nearly as bad as you think it's gonna be. So. Naki's like, can you tell me about Troden? And Lorthos is like, I wasn't there, but my understanding is that there was this kind of corrupt baron, and that there was a rebellion against him. So this civil war in the country of Lordan, and it was like a super poor country. So there were people just dying of starvation. And then near the end, when the rebellion looked like it was getting more strong, the baron like conscripted a bunch of civilians, and not just like regular civilian men who could like fighting age. He conscripted like women, children, elderly, gave them weapons and all this stuff. And then he was a super asshole. And that there's no way they could have said no, because at this juncture, like they had to say yes, or he would have just killed them and their families. And it was at this point where the Ashnok Brigade, who was being paid by the noble to do this, once they realized that he was conscripting like men, women, children, and old men, that they broke their contract, and then they stormed his position. On the way to storm his position, they had to kill all these like innocent people that had been conscripted. Because of that, the rebellion won. But here's the kicker. So this new country was very weak, obviously, and then a neighboring country saw the weakness, rolled in, and just wiped it off the face of the map. Ah, glorious. And Naki's like, wow, that sounds like a terrible war. And Rothos is like, yeah, bitch, all wars are terrible. But no, that one was really bad. You're right. And then Naki brings up Sarah's last comment about unfinished business, and he wonders if I'll ever understand what she was saying. Heading back to the Hawks, General Levant prepares his shock to go. They have a nice little powwow with just like the crew. It's like this epic scene where they're all standing on a thing, and then everyone gets like a reaction. We get a react to everyone making commentary. And then the general kind of like, and then we get like a retread, sort of. The general mentions the noble, his name's Bernhardt, and how he lost his mind. And then essentially he's going to say like, you guys didn't do anything wrong. But then Glenn stops him and mentions that the Hawks broke contract and murder civilians. That is the only truth. And then the general leaves. So then Luke's like, well, there's 5 of us versus the whole Mord army. I think we're doing pretty good. And he's like, what's with this shitty flag up there? Sarah, you see it, and it's actually pretty good. But Sarah's like, Naki made it. And then everyone's like, cool. And then someone's like, hey, it's snowing, just like it was back in Troden. And it's like this. It's actually a super epic, like pretty excellent like cutscene, to be completely honest. We then get Glenn's third bio. It just restates everything we've already learned from him when we were talking to him. Rescued by his men, they all died. Family's lost men hated him. He was attacked. His lover was killed. Later, Lug and Rowan heard about a bounty on this fallen knight, so they went to fight him. But then during the fight between Lug and Glenn, which was already spoken of, Rowan stopped them because he saw like the nobleness of Glenn. And then we also get Karen's kind of third bio situation where she joined up with some sellswords. She found the swindler who ruined her life. He got caught by trying to swindle some noble, and then right as he was about to be executed, she shot him. So it's kind of like, I don't know what you feel so bad about. But then she started wandering and just working for like thugs and sellswords and kind of doing dishonest work and whatever, just kind of getting through the day. And then she finally found the Hawks and joined up with them because she wanted, it was like a better life, like it was less corrupt or whatever. We find the last couple of relics here. Are these the last couple? We've had a couple more relics here. There's a love letter. It's just a fucking love letter. And then a half-written memoir by Levant. And his dude is like Superland words. He's just like, I don't know where I was born. I don't remember. My people are the people of this fort. Also, we had deer for dinner at the end. End of memoir. Like, okie dokie. All right, so then we get this interesting level. I think you have to survive 15 rounds if I counted it correctly. So you just kill. And since... And I lose a couple guys, but it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And Sarah's like virtually invincible at this point. Like dudes are like, so sometimes it'll tell you how much percentage chance you have to hit, or like other people have to hit you. And for her, it's like 0 to 10%. And so I literally went like the last 10 levels, and she never got hit once. And I would just send her off on her own, and she would just like massacre people. Like if she had an AOE attack, the only AOE attack that exists is Urz, where he'll do like a swing and hit everybody in like a square box around him. She would be so ridiculous. So I just like slaughter, and it's like, oh, we got to go back here and like hide and wait for these guys to come and survive for. No, it doesn't tell you how many rounds. But I just like moved on down and like was just slaughtering people. And eventually I got bored and I was like, do I need to lose this battle? And so I lost a couple guys, and then the game just like, and then it was like success. You beat the level, and I was like, oh, okay. Also, the guy who killed Rowan's here, that like big angry dude, but he like disappears pretty quick, and then it's just like, oh, whatever. Then we get a cutscene where everybody's fighting, and then it's like, okay, cool, time to burn the fort down and flee. So we do, and we never saw the Hawk, so it's like, all right, we got to keep him busy because it's not the third day yet. So Glenn's like, all right, so let's flee up the mountains. They'll follow us. We can start picking them off slowly because they can't get as many guys up here. So their mass army is not going to be as effective as it would if we just like fought them in the plains. And that there's still a small chance of survival. Oh, here we go. Last 2 relics. So we get a casualty report. It's just soldiers, tons of names of soldiers being fallen in battle. And then it's like torn up and thrown on the ground. So clearly someone was like, fuck this. And then we get a child's diary and the child's perspective of events from the fort. And it's just kind of like, oh, these people look really stressed out. And I heard they were bad guys, but they seem like nice guys to me. And then we finally get to the last level. So it's the Ashnok's final battle. So they all say their piece again. This is like the 3rd time in the last little bit where they all have like their final says. Urz is excited to die Warrior's death. Karen's like, yeah, it's not a bad way to go. Luke's like, as long as I can be killing Mort when I die, I'll be okay. And then Karen asks why he hates the Mort so much. And then Luke's like, they remind me of me. And then Sarah's like, it's living the last 2 years have been like a living nightmare for me. Tonight I can finally sleep well. This time it's the commander guy with his 2 like foot soldiers, and there's a bunch of like little douchebags around. So we just slaughter everybody. He eventually rolls up, and we lure him into a trap where we surround him with all our guys. So it's like 1 person attacks, and then we get like 4 extra attacks. Wait, 1, 2. We get 3. Yeah, we get 4 extra attacks because there's 5 guys in the team. And we just pummel them to death. And we use all our super attacks, which aren't very useful, and we end up doing like almost 800 damage in like 2 turns because all the special attacks people are doing like 100 or like 78 or 89 damage. And then once you take him down from the first like 250, I think, or 300, I don't remember, he comes back to life, and this time he has like 500 hit points, and then he went down just as fast the 2nd time around. So boom, kill him twice. It was great. Then we get the final cutscene, and it's like everyone's fighting, and then Urz gets hit, and then everyone else gets surrounded. Urz eventually gets killed, his warrior's death that he always wanted. Then Karen follows shortly. She gets killed shortly thereafter. This cutscene's pretty fucking epic. It's long. It's just like a big fight scene, and it's pretty decent, considering like if you're imagining a cutscene from like the early PlayStation 3 or late PlayStation 2 era, it's kind of like on that level. Like it's a Final Fantasy 10. I want to say. Was that PlayStation 3? No, 13 was 3. Yeah. So it's pretty like the cutscene's pretty decent, if not like I imagine I don't think this game even sold for that much. I think it was like a $30 game. But it, for the price and like clearly what they invested in, I hope they made their money back because it was pretty good. Anyway, so then after that, we get some more fighting. Glenn gets it next, then Lug, and that leaves Sarah. And this is exactly where the opening cutscene begins. So if you remember all the way back to the beginning of this video, I talk about we see Sarah, we see this woman like fighting more in the snow. It's like picks up right there. So this is her final like hurrah. And so at this point, she looks up and she hears something. She looks up and sees a hawk flying. So all the people are safe. They made it. Excellent. So now she can die fighting. And then she gets ready to fight, and the scene goes black. So because obviously she dies, and that was the credits roll. Excellent. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was super dark, and I have some qualms with the story, but it's like one of those things where it's a video game story, and I'm like, the more are like kind of they're too ridiculous, right? And it's just like they just keep coming, and there's like no end in sight, and I'm fine with that. But it's so. I read some stuff online and saw people were pretty upset with the ending because it was like too grimdark and they just didn't like it was like so telegraphed that they were all going to die and stuff. But to me, it's like I liked the story because the story to me was more about the characters, their development, and their growth. And there's like a trick in this game. So I mentioned Karen and Glenn's bios, but not Lug's and Ur's, right? So you do have some like visual novel style like choices to make, right? And they obviously lead somewhere because I did not unlock their things, but there's spaces for them, right? So when you do your archive, like where I'm reading all this stuff for the relics and stuff in the bios, there's like space for like 4 more stories, which would literally be Lug 2, Lug 3, Ur's 2, Ur's 3. So at some point when I was talking to people and making commentary, I did not choose the right thing. And I'm not going to go back and play through this game. It's a decently long game, to be honest. To get those, because I can just look them up online if I was really curious, but I'm not. But I like how, to me, the best part of the game is just like the development of the characters, the relationships, how they changed, and how they came to atone for like the things they felt they did wrong, which I don't even feel like what they did was that wrong. And several characters in the game, including Lorthos and Levant and Naki, are like, you guys, you need to like bring it down a notch. So like even the game like understands that like they're being a little dramatic, which I appreciate. So, excuse me, the tactics part were fun. I did cheat, like I mentioned, because I didn't have time to like grind it out, right? Because I got all these games I'm trying to play and get through, and for me to be able to put out these videos and talk about these things at the pace that I want to talk about them, and focus on the stories and whatnot, it's like I don't really need to be like playing through these games like as needed, as originally inclined or designed, right? And even with the cheating, I usually just cheat to a point where I'm just like I eliminate the grinding aspect, especially with these role-playing games, because it's just like I don't need to do that. I just want to play with my powered characters and enjoy myself. And like playing with overpowered Sarah, I love the shit out of that. But if you want, you can go through and you can grind it out, play skirmishes, suck it up with the weapons and all that stuff. I think more power to you. Like that's kind of like some of the design of the game. I don't like games like that. So for me, it is what it is. But yeah, I would recommend this. I wouldn't highly recommend this. I'd say if you're into like strategy tactics games, like obviously you got the Shining Force games, which I'm playing at the same time as this, which are more old school, but you have more current like Fire Emblem games. You got like the Advanced War games, the Final Fantasy Tactics Ogre. There's a lot of their games that I would say like would be on my list for this like turn-based kind of like tactics style strategy games. But I did enjoy this. Yeah, I did enjoy this game. I'm glad I played it and checked it out, and like I'm definitely going to keep an eye on what is it called? Binary Haze, I think, who make the Ender games in this. This is the third game, or this is technically the second series. Ender Lilies, this game, which is totally different thing, and then Ender Magnolia, which have all been good to excellent. And Ender Magnolia, I really enjoyed. Ender Lilies was pretty good, and then this was also pretty good. So I'm looking at like none of these games are lower than like an 80 out of 100, which to me is like a really good score. I'm not like IGN where everything gets a 7, right? It's like an 80 is like a pretty good, like worth your time kind of situation. But anyway, I've talked enough about this. I enjoyed it. Go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.
up, Garen! Here they come!
And now, we're surrounded.
I was hoping we could just gut the big fella and call it a day. Man, I hate being wrong.
I have also been no stranger to fear since the incident. There are things in this world more terrifying than death.
I have nothing left to fear.